I did this was too often, I think, in the K-12 space, we often expect to just jump right in. We're expected to. People are like, just jump right in, just start introducing yourself. I don't know how you feel about that at night in the morning, but it doesn't always work for everyone. If it does work for you, I want to encourage you all to do that, though. So just jump right in. But this morning's discussions are designed to kind of help you ease into this experience. Why? I think that there are so many variety of topics that we covered. There are so many interactive sessions you should be having in your experiences here that these speakers are the ones who are going to launch you into that experience. The goal is to help you better connect with one another prior to your first networking opportunity, and that's the Thought Leadership Exchange Luncheon. Now, in between all of that, you're going to have lots of time to chit-chat with one another, but you're also going to hear from one another as you're asking questions specifically around the topics that these speakers this morning will bring. We've lined these folks up because we really believe they can help spark that conversation. So at that Thought Leadership Luncheon, you're going to be able to sit down, dine with the speakers themselves, and your new colleagues, all of your new friends that you will have met over the next two hours. And you'll more deeply find out what they have to bring to the table. Our goal is to help you kick off these next 2 days with rich, shared experiences that by lunch you'll feel like you're amongst old friends, so that you're able to dive in with great ideas that you can take home and implement, or not, and say, that wouldn't work for my district, and here's why. We want you to have those conversations, and this is your chance to do so. We want you to learn new ways of thinking about old challenges, and we also want you to build new friendships, build new understandings and approaches for how to make greater school district leadership possible with your help. Then you can put away your notes, you can pull up a chair and dine with your new friends, colleagues, and prepare to meet up close and personal the 2019 leaders to learn from. So now let's dive in together. This is my chance to introduce you to somebody that I've seen a couple of times. That I was when I approached him a couple of conferences actually, and this one I talked to him and I was like, I really want you to be there. I want you to kick off this event this year. But before we welcome Dr. Doug Reeves to the stage, let me first tell you a little bit about Doug's work. He's the founder of Creative Leadership Solutions. He's the author of more than 30 books, more than 100 articles on leadership and organizational effectiveness. He has twice been named to the Harvard University Distinguished Authors Series. He's received the Contribution to the Field Award from the National Staff Development Council, which you know is Learning Forward, and was named the Brock International Laureate for his contributions to education. Doug has worked in every state in the United States and over 20 countries. His volunteer activities, which I thought were really cool when I read this, he does something called finishthedissertation.org, providing free, providing free, non-commercial support for doctoral students. Don't laugh, it's true. And the Snafu Review, where they're publishing essays, poetry, stories, and artwork from disabled veterans. If you would all, please welcome me. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Douglas Reeves.
Thanks very much for that gracious introduction, and thank you all for being here. I realize May is a busy time. Some of you are in testing windows. There's a lot going on. So I'm deeply honored that you're willing to spend some time with us today. And I will tell you that I am particularly honored to share this morning with Professor Lucy Calkins. When we're asked, what did you do in your life? A lot of us will be able to say that we were teachers and we were leaders, which is a noble and great thing to do. Lucy will be able to say, well, I taught a couple of billion children to read. And there is, I'm quite serious, nobody in this world has had a more profound impact on literacy, not just in the United States, but around the globe. And I'm deeply honored to share this platform with you. So let's get underway. I've got a few objectives, but let me, if I don't mind, just share with you. You can take notes as frantically as you want, but I will always make all this research available, both the articles as well as all these slides. I'll post them at creativeleadership.net, or if you want to just give me a card, I'll send them to you. The research is there to be shared. There's free videos, articles, tools at creativeleadership.net that you're free to take. In a few words about finishthedissertation.org. I had just finished a volunteer gig in schools in Boston, and I went to a friend of mine at the university and said, so what should my next volunteer gig be? And he said, well, everybody likes to read to a 6-year-old. Nobody likes to read to a 45-year-old graduate student. 69% of doctoral candidates never finish. So we started this group, finishthedissertation.org. It's free, it's non-commercial, literally in a church basement in Boston. We now have students around the world. And if you or a loved one or a colleague is struggling to get unstuck in the dissertation, send them to finishthedissertation.org. We'll help them get unstuck. Here's what I want to do. A few words about just recent research. We're all readers, I'm sure, of Ed Week, and some of this is from their pages. But I just want to share some things literally in the last 10 to 12 weeks that I think are important for us to know. Then I'm going to talk about the hierarchy of claims, because whenever we talk about research, let's be candid, it's not all equal. And I want to talk about a way that we can separate the wheat from the chaff as we discern discern different research. Then I'll finally get to the great degrader issue. And if I could synthesize the great degrader issue and the core competencies that we've learned, it's the following. Most of my research started in what you may recall as the 90-90-90 schools, high poverty, high minority, high achieving schools. Then, thanks to Dr. Jennifer Sparrow in Singapore, I started learning about, so what are some of the world's high wealth schools doing? And here's the bottom line. If you want to be a critical consumer, stop going to conferences that says there's a secret to high poverty education. Because the best things I'm seeing in schools that have 90% free and reduced lunch kids are the same things that I'm seeing in Singapore, same things that I'm seeing in Rwanda, same things that I'm seeing in Taiwan. Great leadership, great education, high expectations. So don't let anybody tell you that there's a special formula for doing things just for poor kids. In fact, the respectful challenge I want to place on the floor is, if any of you represent students who maybe have families that are struggling economically, ask yourself this question. What would we do if they're rich? Because if they were struggling readers and they were rich and they were paying $50,000 tuition in an independent school, we wouldn't say, sink or swim, kid, you should have learned that at home. We'd say, oh my God, we'll move heaven and earth because we'll intervene, we'll give them whatever literacy support they need, because after all, that's what rich kids deserve, right? So seriously, friends, there is no, if I accomplish nothing else, let's bring together what we do for the best schools in the world for what we need to do for the highest need schools in the world. That's the conclusion of that research. And we'll close with an unrecognized 65th anniversary. You'll have to guess between now and 5 minutes to 10 what that 65th anniversary is. So let's get underway. Here is some new research. I'm indebted to the New Teachers Project for doing this. 6 urban schools systems, they looked at thousands and thousands of assignments, and here's the bottom line. 94% of the high school students said they want to go to college. And over half of them were getting A's and B's. And 17% were doing grade level work. We don't know if they could do it or not. We didn't even ask them to. Because if there's a high percentage of low-income kids or a high percentage of kids who are members of ethnic minorities, they could go all year long and not even being asked to do grade level work. I do a lot of classroom visits. I hope you are too. Dick Gilmore says when you make a visit, look down. That is, look at what the kids are doing. Don't just look up at what the teacher is saying. Look down. Go to those writing portfolios and pull out some examples and ask yourself, are we really giving our students the opportunity to do grade level work, because it's not happening? And the evidence from that study said it doesn't have to be that way. I know we have students come to us substantially below grade level. And I'm not saying present grade level work and a miracle happens. But their evidence suggests within 6 months, we can close that gap. But it'll never close if we don't do it. And to the leaders in this room, it means you got to give teachers the time to do it. Look, I'm a math teacher, and you send me kids who can't add, subtract, multiply, and divide. I'll teach them algebra, but I probably can't do it in 1 period a day. I need you as leaders to give me more time to make that happen. Next study, a stunning increase in teenage anxiety, stress, and depression. You probably saw this in the Times. 70% of our teens are reporting more concern about stress, anxiety, and depression than about bullying, alcohol, tobacco, and drug abuse, teen pregnancy. This is serious. And I know that there's a lot of stuff that we can't control on social media and at home that contributes to stress, anxiety, and depression. But friends, I'll tell you what we can do. We can avoid contributing to it. And right now, in May, as I'll show you in a moment, we've got students around the country who have given up hope because of toxic grading systems that say, the mistakes I made in January doom me now. And they've got nothing to do for the next 6 weeks of class except make your lives miserable. And they'll do it. We've got to at least avoid contributing to stress, anxiety, and depression, and I'll give you a case in a moment of exactly how they're doing that. What about what colleges need? Whenever I talk to systems, the challenge always is, well, Doug, we really have to have toxic practices in high school to toughen them up for the toxic practices in college. Not quite sure I follow that logic. And I was out in California, so I picked up the phone and called a friend of mine who teaches at the University of California and said, well, tell me what you're really doing. And here, after interviewing a number of college professors, is what I'm hearing. Number one, our kids have got to be able to take and seek critical feedback. What I'm concerned about is that our honor roll kids always do things perfectly and have never had told you got to rewrite something, redo the lab report. You can do a better job in that essay. Elaborate that problem solving in mathematics more. They've never had critical feedback, and the first time they get it in college, and they crater. I want kids who can take and seek critical feedback, and when they get it, they don't call their lawyer or their mom. They actually talk to you about making it better. They got to advocate for themselves. I'm really concerned about our students who have gotten the message that you only go to the counselor's office if you're in trouble. I want kids to be able to ask for help all the time. What these college teachers told me is the least persuasive thing they hear is a kid coming in December saying, my mom's going to kill me if I don't get a B in the class. That's not the way to ask for help. The first week, ask for help. Let me tell you an authentic Boston story. We were asking these students, why don't you go to the office hours that your professors post? And they said, we thought office hours were when the professors wanted to be alone. They didn't even understand the mechanics of asking for help, and we've got to help kids advocate for themselves. Nonfiction writing, friends. Listen to Lucy. Write to persuade, write to describe, write to compare, write about your passions. I don't care if they're an engineering major, they all need to write more and write better across the curriculum. They've got to close the Blumen computer and have human time. Great book recommendation. Sherry Turkle, MIT, Reclaiming Conversation. When an MIT professor says it's time to close the computer and have human time, take it seriously, because they like computers at MIT, but they also know that our kids are unable to engage in human conversation if we don't practice it. And finally, exploration and curiosity. There was a great article, you might have seen Adam Grant's in the Times. Some of the worst advice our kids are getting is find your passion. No, you're 15 years old. You have no idea what your passion is. Explore, be curious, try different things. And I'm very concerned about turning high schools into these vocational channels where kids are supposed to have their minds made up. Let them try different things. And at the end of your medical channel, for example, they say, I don't want to be a doctor. God bless them. Let them do different things and try different things and explore. Now, cheating our daughters. Who in this room is a parent of daughters? This is serious, because our kids are getting toxic messages, and I've illuminated 4 of them. Number 1, good girls get it right the first time. Our girls, before they enter kindergarten, get the message, you got to be perfect. You got to get it right the first time. And what does that message mean by the time they're in K-12 education? They're terrified of making a mistake. And so they always get it right the first time, and as a result, they rob themselves of the opportunity to make mistakes and get feedback. Good girls know that if an A is better, an A plus is, if an A is good, an A plus is better. I'm indebted to Dr. Lisa Lamore for this research, which she called unproductive overwork. Going from an A to an A plus is staying within the comfort zone. When you've mastered the material in an A, we want our daughters to explore, to try new things, to yes, make mistakes, but they're stuck in the A to A plus channel. Thirdly, good girls know that if you can't say anything nice, don't say it at all. Yeah, I've told my kids that too, but let me tell you about a conversation I overheard in a middle school writing workshop. I knew Annika made a mistake on that essay, but I was afraid if I told her, it would hurt her feelings. So the writer didn't get feedback. The person who was supposed to learn how to give feedback didn't learn how to give feedback. And these social consequences of constructive feedback are robbed. If you've done Lucy's Writer's Workshop, you know that we practice conferring at a very early age. It's one of the most important things we do. And yet, to be blunt, what I fear is that a lot of people honor that in the title, we're doing Readers and Writers Workshop, but I want to see more feedback, more conferring really happening in classrooms. And finally, good girls know that you got to be better than a man to do the job. Well, we've got a lot of women leaders in this room. Here's the evidence that might surprise you. Why is it? Dr. Moore says that women do better in school, earn more college degrees, earn more MBAs today, and yet still constitute only 5% of the leadership positions in the Fortune 500. Part of it is institutional sexism, to be sure. But Dr. Moore says a big part of it is we take ourselves out of the running. 10 criteria for a job and a woman meets 8. Gosh, I guess I'm not qualified until I get those last 2. A man meets 2 of them. I can handle it. Bring it on. Here's what Dr. Lisa DeMoore says. We teach our daughters competence. We teach our sons confidence. And I want to challenge us to make sure that we're giving our daughters the same opportunity to exude confidence as well as the competence that they have. Next. Let's see, decreasing the DF rate. I said a brief word about grading. This is one of the most powerful stories that I've heard, and just to set the stage for you, this is in a large comprehensive system, about 70,000 kids, very poor, 90% plus free and reduced lunch, very strong union, and the teachers involved in this all had 20 plus years, so the classic resistant to change, secondary, card-carrying union member, and yet they decreased the DF rate 80, 90, in one case 100% in a single year. And it wasn't rocket science. What they did was to, first of all, get rid of the average. Stop punishing kids in May for the mistakes that they made later. I mean, if we could all agree, whatever our disagreements may be about grading policy, that grades ought to at least be accurate. Friends, if you've got students who are getting C's and B's on assessments, that are getting F's for the semester because of missing work in February, and it's happening all over the country, that is the definition of inaccuracy. That is saying you'll always be punished for mistakes that were made. Here's the analogy. Are some of you going to have end-of-year concerts? And the audience will all be, don't applaud. Don't applaud at those concerts, because those kids sounded terrible in September. Make sure you punish them. Yeah, you know, in that context, it's silly, but it's what we do in math and English and history classes all year long. And the other thing, if you could just make those 2 little things, so I'm not talking about overwhelming the system. All these educators did, they got rid of the average, and they went back to the old-fashioned ABCDF system, the way we've been calculating grade point averages for almost 400 years. A is a 4, B is a 3, C is a 2, D is a 1, F is a 0. That's it. Nothing more complicated. Get rid of the dumb 100-point system where people think that it's precise because they think an 82 is different from an 83. Get rid of it. Just go back to plain old-fashioned ABCDF grading. Parents like it, kids like it. You'll still have transcripts, you'll still have GPAs. And let me tell you what these teachers told me. When they got rid of the average, they got rid of the 100-point scale, they stopped grading homework. Here's what everybody said. Well, you're just dumbing it down. You're just trying to help those low-performing kids. That's not what happened. Because they also have 3 years of final exam scores, and they can document that while they were doing this, actual achievement increased. It wasn't grade inflation, it was work inflation. The kids worked harder. And what happened when they stopped grading homework? They could finally have honest conversations about what they don't know. Because these days, you can turn in a perfect homework set, downloaded conveniently from the internet or copied from a friend, and once you think that I'm perfect, I can't have an honest conversation about what I don't know. When they stopped grading this homework, it started honest conversations. How about rethinking silent reading? Here is my concern. I know a lot of you have invested a lot of money in technology, but when I'm observing silent reading classes in the last few months, here's what I'm seeing. Hundreds of books on the iPad. The classroom is silent, so everybody thinks reading is going on. Sit down next to the kids as I did. They're scrolling through title after title after title. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, not reading a single thing because they're overwhelmed with the choices. Put the books, real books, in the hands of the kids. That's what we need to do. And give them the opportunity to write about what they've read. I think people think that writing has become this drudgery because of the way that we've manufactured drudgery into writing in state tests. But reflecting on text, wondering about text, can be a marvelous experience and restore some of the joy of reading, thinking, and writing all together. Homework and practice. The second most emotional topic in education, right after grading, is homework. So I know there's a lot been written in the pages of Ed Week and elsewhere. I'll just say the following. Why do teachers assign homework? Because kids need practice. And we all agree, practice is important. But let's think. Ask your music directors, ask your athletic coaches, what does a good practice look like? In fact, let's just do that here. Do we have anybody here who's been a coach? Who's coached? What do you coach?
Track.
You coach track. And so I assume what you do is you have your students put those hurdles in their backpack and go home and do the odd numbered hurdle problems, 1 through 30? Yeah, there you go. Yeah, triple jump it in the living room. Look, we know what good practice looks like after coaches. It's feedback. It's response to feedback. It's immediate. And when there's feedback, when there's coaching, when there's response to feedback, that's good practice. And that never happens at home. So yes, kids need practice. But what's happening at homework, and I'm indebted to Alexandria Neeson for this study, synthesis of 37 studies says the impact of homework on academic achievement is 0. Zip. Nada. Some of the best schools I'm studying have stopped grading it because the sort of things that we do in homework is not practice. Eric Mazur at Harvard, physics teacher, is a wonderfully brilliant guy, and he used to assign these problem sets and realized they could do the problem sets or maybe copy them from a roommate, but they weren't learning physics. So now he uses these old-timey whiteboards to do the work in class. Yes, they need practice, but practice means coaching and feedback, and we can do it in class, not the illusion that it happens at home. And frankly, when I see kids flunking because of missing homework, who in the world are we grading anyway? So let's just skip ahead to the hierarchy of claims, as I promised you. A lot of us have sat in meetings where people will say, research says that, studies show that, and I've been there too. So let me articulate 5 levels of ways that you and I have evaluated claims. Level 1, I believe it. I believe kids need homework because it builds character. I believe in the 0 on the 100-point scale. Hey, God bless the First Amendment of the United States. Everybody's entitled to their own beliefs. They're just not entitled to their own facts. And so when you hear somebody talk about their belief, let's stop calling it evidence. Level 2, experience. Well, I've been teaching for 21 years, Doug. Great. That's a sample size of 1. Please don't call it evidence. Well, Doug, it's not just me. It's the whole 3rd grade team. It's the whole math department. Great. That's collective experience. Please don't call it evidence. But level 4, this is what everybody in this room can do. Systematic comparison. Those educators who had the giant drop in D's and F's, let me tell you what they did. We called it the science fair for adults. No dissertations, no glitter, no PowerPoint, just simple 3-panel boards that said, what was my challenge? What was my intervention? What were my results? And in beautiful systematic comparison, same teacher, same curriculum, same exam last year. Now I made these changes in my instruction and grading system this year. 2 simple bars, systematic comparison. We can all do that, no matter what the size of your system is. And my experience is that inside-out research, local evidence of effectiveness is some of the best, most persuasive things you can do. And moreover, it allows you to demonstrate to even the most skeptical person that things can work. So systematic comparison, that's great. And level 5, preponderance of the evidence. That's what I try to bring to the table. Look, I'm just a quantitative researcher, and I know you can't measure everything with a number. But if I have a study of 2,000 schools that I'll show you in a little bit, that shows you that efficacy came out number 1, and then Michael Fullen, from a qualitative lens, says efficacy turns out number 1, and then Marzano, with his latest October evidence, says collective efficacy was number 1, and then John Hattie's synthesis of many meta-analyses says efficacy is number 1. Brother, take it to the bank. See, it's not one researcher anymore. It's different methods, different perspectives, different people operating independently. That's preponderance of the evidence. And I think that ought to be the standard. Level 4 and level 5, systematic comparison, preponderance of the evidence that you demand, and stop settling for beliefs and personal experiences. So let us finally get to the topic at hand, great to greater. And here is the context. We looked at schools all around the world. Dr. Sparrow, my coworker on this, was lucky enough to be on the visitation team and accreditation team for a number of schools. So she saw some great ones, and my research, principally in the United States, is focused on these schools as well. Some were high poverty, some were low poverty, some were suburban, some urban, some were rural. All kinds of different perspectives here. They included public and independent schools, charter schools and international schools, and a variety of characteristics. And here is what we learned. Number 1, we looked at top performing schools that got better and better and better. They were already a success by any measure. but they redefined what success looked like. And they included schools with high second language populations, but once they've made achievements, it's too easy. Gee, we went from wretched to good and good to great, let's settle down. They never settled down. And they kept moving the goalpost to challenge themselves to get better and better. My colleague from Alexandria, or Arlington rather, up front and I were talking about the limit effect. If you're in a high-performing system and you're close to 85, 90% of kids being proficient, the closer you get to any statistical limit, the more error there is, the more random noise there is. So going from 95 to 96 doesn't mean a whole lot, nor does it mean anything if you go from 96 to 95, their achievement is plummeted. The closer you are to the limit, the more random variation there is. So redefine the limit. Create new accountability systems that go way beyond what your state is asking you to do. And that was the #1 finding of this study. Every one of these greater schools practiced what I would call holistic accountability. Accountability as more than test scores. Because it always includes things beyond what your state measures right now. Now, it is not my purpose to pick fights within the shadow of the U.S. Department of Education about No Child Left Behind. I will tell you this. I spoke to one of the authors of the Every Student Succeeds Act. And he said, and he was a red state Republican, standing next to President Obama when that was signed, at some political risk to himself. And he said the reason we did that was to repeal No Child Left Behind, to give people in this room the opportunity to redefine what accountability was. And all we've got to show for it is No Child Left Behind 2.0. And I want to suggest there is flexibility that for the most part we are simply not using, and I want to suggest we can use it. So here are some things that we saw. They created exceptional depth and focus. So all kinds of opportunities to go beyond simply curriculum achievement, state standards, international standards, AP or IP. They created their own curriculum with greater depth and rigor. Pastoral care, that's their term, saying, and I know social and emotional learning, call it what you will, but it's not just seminars and the whole child. It is relationships, one-on-one with every single student. I don't think we ought to start school next year without knowing something about our children beyond what's happening in the classroom. A sibling, an interest, a pet, a passion. We ought to know what's going on there. Early childhood, how much more evidence do we need that what's happening in 3rd and 4th grade test scores is profoundly influenced by early childhood, and yet it's invisible. It doesn't show up in the test scores. And worst of all is the practice of taking teachers who are great in early childhood, but if they're great, I better move them into a tested grade. And take somebody who's not so effective and move them into kindergarten. What a Faustian bargain. And so if we believe early childhood is important, darn it, put it in the accountability plan, whether or not your governing body or state pays any attention to it. Visual and performing arts. I'll bet a lot of you are proud of that. They're invisible. One state, I want to honor Connecticut. We've got people in this room. Connecticut is the only state I know of that incorporated the arts and access to the arts in their state accountability plan. Where's the rest of the 49 in saying that the arts are really important? When in fact what we have seen is to see the arts decimated in favor of the pursuit of test scores elsewhere. And leadership and service. We say it's important, it's not there. In general, what I want to see is causes as well as effects. So I've talked long enough. I want to give you a couple of minutes to exchange an idea with a colleague and tell me what you're proud of that is invisible in your accountability system right now. Take 2 minutes and then I'll read this. invisible. And what I'm saying is, don't wait for Washington, don't wait for your state capital to put it in the accountability system. We need to be creating accountability systems, and schools are doing it, that reflect those things right now. And also reflect the great work that teachers and leaders are doing as well. So let's talk about the path to greater. Here are what I've identified as the core competencies of these great to greater schools, and you can see them briefly. And let me just touch on each one of these, beginning with focus. Because among the findings that I think are absolutely consistent in my research and elsewhere is that schools that try to do too many things become fragmented. And when I looked at achievement data, there was a direct relationship between actually an inverse relationship between the number of priorities that they had and gains in student achievement. Michael Fullen, who wrote the introduction to that study, said that the quantity of initiatives is inversely proportional to student success. Now, what's the magic number? I won't argue with you. In the study that I did, it was 6. If you want to have 7 or 5, that's okay with me. But no more than about 6 priorities per school, 6 per department, 6 for the system at large. It's got to be focused for deep implementation. Because here's what I learned, these half-hearted attempts. Well, we'll try this new math initiative, literacy initiative, and incrementally get better. Incrementalism doesn't work. In fact, it is the prescription for frustration, because people will implement something incrementally. Well, no results yet. A little bit more, no results yet. Well, I guess that didn't work. Let's go buy a new initiative. And they repeat the same thing all over again. The evidence, however, shows that deep implementation, you're going to do Readers and Writers Workshop, give it the time and the intensity and the focus that it deserves, then you will see great results. But if that, as I have seen, is done simultaneously with 6 other literacy programs, don't expect to see a whole lot of results. It's got to have intentional focus. It's got to have student focus. Here was a surprising finding. In some of these very high-performing schools, they had fewer electives, fewer courses. It wasn't unusual to see 5 or 6 courses there in contrast to low-performing schools that had 8 or 9 things on the agenda in an attempt to satisfy everybody. It is a prescription for fragmentation, and no wonder that our kids are up till midnight trying to play whack-a-mole with every curriculum opportunity that they have. And it included emotional and physical health as well. What's the evidence? I mentioned that big study that I did a while back, and so I redid the data for this study to say, let's just pull out the highest performing schools. Because the illusion can be, if you look at a big data set, well, of course, some schools do better than others, and that may do a variety of factors. But I just pulled out the highest performing schools and said, of those, what the vertical axis represents were gains in student achievement over 3 years, K through 12. And the horizontal axis represents how they succeeded in focus, in efficacy, in prioritization. Those things really matter. Even if you're a very high-performing system, you get better and better when you have higher levels of focus and higher levels of efficacy. Inquiry. These schools have a culture of hypothesis testing. And it's interesting to me that it turns the traditional change model on its head. Because the traditional change model is, well, you've got to have the coalition and you've got to get buy-in from everybody. You want to know what? When a leader tells me, I've got buy-in from the whole staff, one of 2 things has happened. Either A, they're not asking for change, or B, the real arguments are happening out in the parking lot, not in your office. So I've stopped asking for buy-in. Change does not happen after buy-in. Change happens through action, and then I observe the results, and then, having observed the results, I buy in. Stop waiting for buy-in. If you believe that model of change, you'll never make a change. And so I have these respectful dialogues with colleagues who say, I know you don't believe in writing in mathematics or writing in history. I grant that. I'm not asking you to like it. I'm asking you to do it, observe the results, and if I'm wrong, I'll admit in front of God and everybody that I was wrong. But if I'm right, and we can observe these things in 100-day cycles, then and only then will I ask you for buy-in. Holistic accountability. I mentioned earlier the things that you're doing that we don't pay attention to, and it's not just music and art and social and emotional health. It's us. The missing part of most accountability systems is teaching and leadership variables. And we can be as specific and clear in effective teaching and leadership variables as we are in measuring student achievement. We just haven't done it. I mean, think of it this way. If we were to have a health initiative, and we know that there's a teenage obesity crisis, and we decided, great, we'll weigh every student, we'll publish their body mass index in your report cards. Would you want to know as a parent if those variables were changing due to your diet and exercise program or due to anorexia and drug abuse? Because both of those things will make their body mass index go down. But I'd want to know as a parent what the underlying cause was. An accountability system that does not include causes, teaching and leadership, is bankrupt. And again, don't wait for any governmental authority to tell you to do it. Just do it because it's the right thing to do. And we have a system of indicators that includes what the system needs and what the schools need. Feedback. The acronym here is FAST. It's got to be fair, accurate, specific, and timely. I know we are burdened with ridiculous teacher evaluation systems in many of your states, and probably nothing I can do to change that. But I have never seen anybody get evaluated into better performance. But I have seen people get better performance with feedback. So feedback that is accurate, specific, and timely for students, for teachers, for leaders. That's what we need to do. Don't wait for the evaluation system to change. I'm tired of holding my breath on that. But all of us, independent of evaluation systems, can improve the clarity, the specificity of feedback that we provide to students and to each other. I realize that this is a controversial thing to say, but there's a lot of things out there masquerading as formative assessment that are better described in an article that I wrote called uninformative assessment. That is, they're not summative, but if it's formative, it's informing teaching and learning. If it's uninformative, it means, thank God that's over, now I can go back to what I was doing before. And there's a lot of assessments out there that we're spending money on that are just in that category. Ask yourself, can it be used to influence tomorrow's teaching and learning? The answer is no, it's uninformative. We've got to get rid of what I've called academic corporal punishment. Now, I guess I should check my assumptions here. Well, everybody who thinks that beating children is a good way to improve behavior, please. Okay, I don't see. Well, you'll probably tell me after, because I have heard people say, well, it worked for me. You know, to our national disgrace, do you know that 19 states still allow corporal punishment? You know that last year 110,000 kids received corporal punishment. And just to go on a slight research birdwalk, anybody want to guess at the date of the study that said it doesn't work? In fact, it's counterproductive, leads to worse behavior and more bullying? 1960. That's 3 years before the Surgeon General said smoking is a bad idea. So corporal punishment doesn't work, and most of us don't believe in it. But we tolerate academic corporal punishment all the time because we still have this culture that grading as punishment works. And it doesn't. When Thomas Guskey reviewed a century of research on grading, if there's one conclusion, it's that grading as punishment does not work. And if you think those F's and zeros do work, you ought to be able to raise your right hand and say, we've got, as a result of a century of F's and zeros in grading as punishment, the most on-time quality work ever submitted in the history of our school system. Nobody is telling me that. It doesn't work. Stop using grading as punishment. And they reject some ineffective teacher and leadership evaluations, and they have a culture instead of daily feedback, constant feedback that is not part of the evaluation system. What about efficacy? The operational definition, here's a practical idea you could take away. Please do not hire the inspirational speaker to sing the efficacy song and do the efficacy dance, okay? That's not efficacy. Instead, ask this question. What causes student achievement? And I do this with faculties, what causes student achievement? And write them all down. And they'll say, well, you know, it's effective teaching and effective feedback, but they'll also say it's alcohol, tobacco, and drug abuse, it's sleep deprivation, it's inattentive parents. I grant all those things. Write them all down. And you'll have three categories. Stuff I can control, stuff I can influence, and things I can neither influence nor control. Efficacy is all about the first two columns being greater than the last column. I admit there are things we can't control that influence achievement, but there's a ton of things that we influence and control that are dramatically more powerful, even including attendance, even including screen time. There's a lot of things that when we talk about them, we can influence. That's efficacy. They redefine what great is. For example, one of the highest performing schools in the world that we studied stopped using superlatives in their yearbook. They're getting rid of the notion of the valedictorian, which is 3.99995, who was clearly superior to the salutatorian at 3.99996. It's a farce, and here's why. What really separates those two, if you've got quality points, the kid who was wise enough not to take 9th grade band was able to get the quality point. The kid who didn't have to work a summer job and so was able to take an extra college course got the quality points as a valedictorian. I don't mean to in any way malign your valedictorians. I mean to say the distinction between 1 and 2 is a distinction without a difference. A far better system is the Latin honor system. Highest honors, high honors, and honors. And you set the criteria, and if nobody meets it for highest honors, nobody meets it. If 3 students meet it, 3 meet it. But you stop the silliness of the competition that creates these distinctions that are unhelpful. And when some of the best schools in the world are going to that system, I would at least respectfully like to ask you to consider it as well. My colleague, Dr. David Gleason, wrote a splendid book, At What Cost? The Emotional and Developmental Cost of High-Performing Students. And what I saw in these schools wasn't just this incessant race to superiority, but time to get off the treadmill, time to care about the lives of our students. Read yesterday's New York Times ethicist column by Professor Anthony Appiah. It'll make you weep, because it is a response to a kid who was rejected by his colleges of choice. And Professor Appiah's response to that was, if you spend the rest of your life deciding you're going to compare yourself only to others who are now celebrating college admissions, you've got a miserable life ahead of you. It's not about comparison. It's not about always being superior. It's about being the best you that you can be. Read his column this week in the New York Times Magazine. Let's take a few vignettes from these schools. I love this teacher. They get together, they share their exit slips, so it's very authentic. What happened today in class and how can I get better? And she deliberately showed her exit slips from her last class of the day. It was hot in an unair-conditioned building. This happened to be 8th grade English language arts, not easy in any circumstance. And here's the footnote to that, is she's saying, how can I make my teaching better? She was in her last 30 days of her career. And she's trying to make her 40th year better than her 39th year. That is the sort of thing that I find deeply inspiring. Let's see. I'm sorry that I can't read this. It was clear by December that even high-performing students were behind in grammar. These teachers, on the fly, during the year, were creating new curriculum. Nobody ever got awards for creating new curriculum during the year when they all feel overburdened, but that's what they did. They identified the deficiencies and created new things. I just want to say a few more of these vignettes. They talked about good meetings that were worth having, meetings only for deliberation and inquiry. And if you as leaders want to make one thing that your faculty will regard as a gift, stop having announcements in meetings. Sing happy birthday once a year. And honest to goodness, the rest of that, if it's not for deliberation and inquiry, stop doing the meetings. I know superintendents who are setting quantitative goals to reduce meeting times so that we can have time to deliberate, have time to look at assessments, have time to look at authentic student work and confer with one another. They are clearly raising the bar, and they're just never ever satisfied with what they're doing. I want to jump ahead to a blueprint for action because I want to give you a few opportunities for questions and stay rigorously on time because I'm not going to step 1 minute on Lucy's time. Here are some things that I'd like you to consider. Define what happens beyond test scores, and that means for the school and for the system. Define causes. You don't need a 30-page evaluation program to say what are the essentials of teaching that lead to better achievement. We know, for example, that whenever I do an observation, I simply count objectively. What percentage of students got feedback? What percentage of students responded to feedback? I don't need a 30-page evaluation form, and that is objective, clear feedback. And if the answer is 0, that tells me that there was all teacher talk and not nearly enough engagement. So there may be other things. For example, do we have every student engaged? Every student with an opportunity to be called on? Or are we still using the primitive hand raising? If I could ask one request of my colleagues in the classroom, it is to use hand raising to ask a question, never to answer a question. When it's time to answer a question, everybody has an equal probability to being called on, and stop the practice of hand raising. We all did it. We all raised our hands. That's why we got college degrees and became teachers. But we've got to stop doing it now with today's students. And plan the science fair. Another practical idea. If you want one takeaway from today, you don't need a study. You don't need a research firm. You've got the research in your classrooms. Plan a science fair, literally before the end of this calendar year. And the science fair are these, this is money now, $2.59 at Office Max, to buy these 3-panel things. What was my challenge? What was my intervention? What were my results? With that simple science fair idea, you'll document the innovations that work, and some of them won't work, but you'll learn well from that as well. Some of the best change initiatives that I see happen inside out because people were courageous enough to have this simple science fair approach that worked. Here are some enemies of Great Degrader. Words like effect-based accountability, which is all that's test scores, it's ruining us. We think we learned that after 19 years and we still haven't. Words like adequate progress. Now that's inspiring, isn't it? Even words like proficient, and Gusky, to his credit, many of you are using words like exceeds standards. It's sending the wrong message. Exceed sounds like a quantitative game. 7 pages instead of 5, and a longer report instead of a shorter one. If you really want to have differences in rigor and complexity, call it exemplary. Talk about rigor and complexity. Don't use words like exceeds because it seems like a little bit better than proficient, which I don't think is a high enough bar for any of us. So I'm going to talk about the anniversary, but I still have got about 7 or 8 minutes that I can take some questions or comments. And friends, this is also a safe and appropriate place for challenges. If you think I'm wrong about something, please feel free to push back. That's what good academic discourse is all about. So I welcome your questions, but also your disagreements. I won't make anybody speak into a microphone. I'll repeat the question. So I'm afraid I don't see very well, so if I don't see your hand, I'm not being rude, just holler at it. Yes, please.
Good morning. How do you overcome the state giving you what you have to do and the expectations of the state exams and all of the things that you're saying is not good practice? How do you overcome that? Because you only have a certain amount of time in a year and you have to accomplish these goals. So how do you overcome that?
Yes, ma'am. The question is, how do we overcome some of the state demands, particularly focused on tests? And the obvious answer is we don't fight City Hall in terms of the compliance with the state requirement. But I'll tell you what I saw last night that my editor sent me. Her child's teacher sent a note to every parent and every child, and I wish I could quote it because it was so beautifully written, that basically said, we all know that we have tests coming up in the next few weeks, and the state takes them seriously, and I know you'll do your best because we worked hard all year. But I want to tell you something this teacher said really important. You are not your test scores. And if we could just say that to our children, we could reduce the anxiety. Because I'm concerned, ma'am, that the anxiety of teachers is telegraphed to students right now. Not a whole lot of evidence that high anxiety leads to better performance. So thank you for raising it. Yes, please.
Yeah, you made mention of cutting back on electives to go more in depth with the portion of it. Also talked about what are the hourly assessments with non-assessed. So we talked about arts classes and things like that. So I'm just interested to see how you balance between those two, cutting back on electives and also
Yes, sir. The question is, I appear to be contradictory when I said they had fewer electives, but I still said the arts were important. Here's what I saw in these schools that only had 5 or 6 courses. They absolutely included the arts. So there was a choice. It might be visual arts, performing arts, and so on. So the kids were definitely doing the arts. But it was a choice of 1 or 2, not these days filled with 9 separate periods that I'm seeing in low-performing schools where the kids are fragmented and focused on nothing. So I thank you for letting me clarify that. I absolutely believe in support for the arts and athletics as well. Those schools had every kid involved in some kind of extracurricular activity. And that, by the way, ought to be another accountability indicator. What percentage of kids are involved in extracurriculars? In these great schools, it's 100%. Because it's strongly related to good peer groups. So thank you, sir. Yes?
An easy question. What was the article you said you read from yesterday's New York Times?
The question from yesterday's New York Times, if you read the Sunday magazine, it's the ethicist column by Professor Appiah, and it is, and it's on the online. If you go to the New York Times website, click magazine, ethicist, you'll see it right there. It's stunningly good. And if you follow me on Twitter, I already posted his article last night there. Yes, please.
You mentioned that the valedictorians, the selection process, basically there was quality points. Having been an arts advocate, one of the things I discovered was that the universities discount students taking the arts when they look at the quality points for their admissions.
Yes, sir. The gentleman says that the universities discount the arts because they don't have quality points, and we do the same thing. That's why some of these great schools don't do quality points. because they're making a big statement on their transcript that what we do with you, sir, of the arts is as important as what they do with me in calculus. And if we believe that, let's put our policies where our philosophies are. A couple more. Okay, the reveal of the anniversary. What happened? 65. Oh, I'm sorry, is there a question in the very back? Okay. What happened 65 years ago this month? You nailed it. May 1954. Brown versus Board of Education, a case about which I happen to know a lot because I was raised in Topeka, and I knew the people on both sides, and my father was an attorney involved with knowing these folks and working with them, and it's a remembrance I want to leave you with today. There's a fellow named John Davis, very distinguished litigator representing the state of South Carolina, among many other defendants in this case. And here is what he told the United States Supreme Court Assembly. He said, "You're moving too fast." 1954. "Moving too fast. We should take a more gradual approach. And you're taking away local control." He said, "Things are fine as they are. People are happy. Why change it?" And here, stunningly, in the transcript, "We're not going to change. I don't care if the decision is 9-0 and you can't make us." And he opened the oral arguments with the following statement. He said, if the appellant, that's Linda Brown and her father, Mr. Oliver Brown, the appellants in this case, in their construction of the 14th Amendment should prevail, there's no doubt in my mind it would include the Indian within its grasp as much as the Negro. The argument was, if you let Linda Brown go to the school, the next thing you know, we'll have Indians going to school, and everybody knows we can't do that. It gets worse if you're not offended yet. If Linda Brown should prevail, I'm unable to see why a state would have any further right to segregate peoples on the ground of sex or age or mental capacity. If you let Linda Brown win this case, the next thing you know, we'll have disabled kids in schools, and we all know we can't do that. Now, who knew that this case wasn't just about one child in Topeka, but was about all kinds of disadvantaged groups, including our disabled kids? We owe her such a legacy 65 years later. Finally, after this guy, Davis, had gone on long enough, Felix Frankfurter interrupted him with words that should resonate with us today. He said, "Attitudes in this world are not changed abstractly, as it were, by reading something. Attitudes are partly the result of working. Attitudes are the result of action. You do not fold your hands and wait for attitudes to change by themselves." I recognize everything you learned at this conference can run into a buzzsaw of opposition, just as it did 65 years ago today. And you'll have people say, "You're moving too fast. Take a more gradual approach, or we're just not going to change." And if we listen to what the legacy of this case is, it is the following: let your actions speak. Thanks for sharing the morning with me.